Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. It's my great pleasure and honor to be joined by Professor Hans-Ulrich Gumbrecht at Stanford University, you're Professor Emeritus of Comparative Literature. And today we're going to discuss Robert Musil's Der Mann ohne Eigenschaften, the man without qualities, as it's translated, something we might touch on as well, and why that title is significant. And I also want to mention that Professor Gumbrecht, Sepp, is teaching a course on this very book, which begins, I think, end of April, 20th of April, as far as I know. I will link to that.
Visuals date 20th of April. That's an ominous date, but in April.
So we're already unqualified here. And then we'll I'll link to the course in the description here if you're interested. Just fill in the application form so you can join the course. So Sepp, over to you. What's
for the application?
yeah, for the course, yeah. Just
You should say the link.
yeah. So I'll link to the website for the course and the application. So my general question for the beginning would be, what's the context of the book? Where and when does Musil write this, and why, and over how many years, etc.?
Yeah, this is certainly important to understand Musil. I mean, he's the typical great author of only one book. I mean, he wrote a book when he was a relatively young man, a young Turles, and that was a big success. But the one book, the one manuscript he worked on during his entire life until he died in the early 1940s was The Man Without Qualities. And The Man Without Qualities, to locate that book historically in Musil's life, is about the most incisive discontinuity, I would say, in Western history. And that is 1914. That is World War I. I mean, Musil was born in the Austro-Hungarian Empire that he calls Kakanien, in KUK Empire, as the Austrians called it, Kakanien. And he was an inhabitant, and he was his intellectual profile is from this multicultural, multinational empire that was in its political frame very old-fashioned, but had a very intense intellectual life, especially in Austria. And Musil comes from there. Musil is inspired from that world. But then comes World War I, which as a change, as the end of this old world, as the end of the old world and of a new world that nobody knew yet, was a much greater discontinuity, I think, than World War II between 1939 and 1945. So Musil then, in the 1920s, lived in Berlin, which, although Germany had lost World War I, was one of the intellectual centers, the productive intellectual centers of modernity in the 20th century. Musil lived there in Berlin, so his life bridges this old-fashioned world and the new world that nobody could really figure out. He then spent time when the Nazis took power, because he was married to a Jewish wife. In 1933, he went back to Austria. But when the annexation happened, the Anschluss, as the Nazis called it, with too mild a word, in 1938, he had to leave Austria because he was married to a Jewish wife. And he spent the last 3 years of his life basically looking for shelter. He ended up being in Switzerland, in Geneva, very poor. And due to the circumstances, there was absolutely no chance for him to finish this fantastic life project and book, The Man Without Qualities. So what I want to emphasize is that Musil's life doesn't necessarily have two parts as a life, but it has two sources of inspiration. It is, on the one hand, this old-fashioned, traditional, relatively quiet world of the Austrian Empire. And it is, on the other hand, this open and then all of a sudden, especially in Germany, very dramatic new world after World War I. And Musil has not experienced, he has not lived long enough to see that then in World War II, the Nazi Empire was defeated. So when Musil died in Geneva, as I was saying, very poor and helpless, he probably imagined that the world of the 20th century, the future, would be a future under the dominance of fascism or Nazism.
And in what sense would you think today that 100 years later, one should read the book, or why would anyone turn to the book now? What do we find in
the first day,
relation?
and you will see that for people who are listening to us, if they go to the link for that course that I will do, it is one of the least read grand books. Yeah, I mean, it has often been said that there are three great novels, and we could discuss this genre concept novels in Western culture in the 20th century, and this is in historical order. Marcel Proust's À la recherche du temps perdu, in search for lost time. Then James Joyce's Ulysses, and the one other narrative that has this quality is The Man Without Qualities by Robert Musil. But Robert Musil is much less read and much less discussed then Proust and then Joyce. I mean, difficult to explain why this is the case. Everybody knows it's an important book that one should read, but very few people read it. One reason why it is so little read may have to do with the fact it is unfinished. It is a 1,500 plus pages fragment. We don't know how the story that is being told there will come to an end. The importance of the book and why one should read it today, however, I believe can best be explained by its title. The Man Without Qualities. What does Musil mean when he says the man without qualities? That can be explained by a concept he introduces early in that book, and that book always has philosophical chapters, easy to read, but very, very complex in their thought, when he talks about the sense of reality and the sense of possibility. So the sense of reality of people who are successful in everyday life because they always know on what they have to concentrate, what they have to do, and what they do not have to do. The sense of possibility, Möglichkeitssinn in German, of which Musil talks and which he in a way favors, is a sense that instead of focusing always on the one important thing, sees alternatives, sees other possibilities. And that means for a person or for a protagonist of a novel, that even if that protagonist, and Ulrich, that is the main character of The Man Without Qualities, is highly qualified. I mean, he's a mathematician, he's an engineer, he's an athlete, he's a very erotically attractive man, he is wealthy, etc., etc. He has all qualities that you can possibly imagine, but he doesn't stick to these qualities. He always thinks about alternatives. He always thinks about what else he could do. This is why once he actually starts with as a cavalry officer, but then he becomes an engineer, then he becomes a mathematician, and then he asks himself, but what should I really do? He always hesitates when it comes to the moment of application, as Musil is saying. So there is this sense and this lifestyle of possibilities, of having too many alternatives, which in the time that Musil describes, and the book is basically focusing on the 1 year preceding the beginning of World War I, is focusing on 1913, 1914. This was a privilege to be in such a situation. Very few people had the possibility, as Ulrich, I mean, who in the novel is the son of a very wealthy and well-respected father who has studied everything, and you could afford not to practice a profession. I think in the present day economic situation and social situation in Western countries, what used to be a privilege in the Austrian Empire and before World War I has become a much broader condition of life. Yeah? There are many people today, comparatively, who at age 30, at age 40 have been so successful in their profession that basically they have no need, no economic need, no need of social prestige to pursue any purpose, any professional goal. And they are in this situation where you start asking yourself, what shall I do with my life? I have too many possibilities. Yeah, I mean, I could just retire, or I could change profession, or I could try to become an athlete, or I could try to become an artist. So the point I want to make is that today, many people, cultivated people, many more people than in the early 20th century, are in a situation of being men or women. This is not only for men, without qualities, who have all qualities, but do not necessarily stick to these qualities, who think of alternatives. And because they think of alternatives, and because they are sometimes overwhelmed by alternatives, by possibilities, are not happy with their life. That is, I think, why the condition that Musil describes and on which he focuses with his main protagonist has become a much more widespread form of life, problem of life, existential problem in the, well, approaching mid of the 21st century.
So there's a sense of it's not that he doesn't have any qualities, it's almost he has too many. And so this is right at the chapter 4, which I have open here, just before the man without qualities introduced as Ulrich. This is in German, I'm trying to translate. And as the possession of qualities presupposes a certain pleasure with actuality or reality, then that's, now summarizing, that's sort of what he doesn't have. So he doesn't take pleasure too much in actuality. He wants to live in a, as he puts it on the next page, a conjunctive potentialis. So is there certain pleasure, you would say, or joy with potentiality or possibility?
Yes and no, I think, in the case of this character. I mean, he's oftentimes compared and contrasted in the novel with this adolescent friend. I mean, adolescence friend goes back to adolescence, Walter. Yeah, Walter is a very successful engineer, businessman, etc., etc. And Walter is not a man without qualities in the sense of Ulrich, not a man of many possibilities. Walter always knows only too much what he wants to do. And compared to Walter, Ulrich, the man without qualities, the man with the sense of possibility, is the more interesting character, the superior character. Also, he's much more attractive, erotically attractive to Walter's wife, Clarisse, because she finds him interesting. And clearly, Ulrich enjoys that situation. But at the same time, and this is why I was saying he's happy with that yes and no, at the same time, there's always an urge in Ulrich that he has to find finally his destination. I mean, what is he supposed to do? What will he achieve in life? Yeah, I mean, actually, the idea of this year that he spends in Vienna is to take a time out, but not to take a time out, not to do something, but to take a time out, which is a paradox, to find out what he really wants to do. So in this sense, and I think this is something present-day readers can identify with, can find themselves in. There is a pleasure and a privilege of being able to be a man without qualities, to have all qualities, but not being in need of them. And on the other hand, the situation of being unfulfilled, the situation that you have to achieve something. I mean, this cannot be just a professional achievement. I mean, Musil mentions in passing in one of the introductory chapters that Walter has been very successful as a mathematician, which was more fashionable in the early 20th century than it would be now. Maybe, you know, today he would be very, very successful as an AI engineer or something like that. But this was not enough. He wanted something more necessary, maybe, Musil doesn't say that, more beautiful, more existentially fulfilling. Yeah, but it is a problem that at the same time implies a privilege. You have to be able to be in this situation. And more people today, I think, This economic situation has profoundly changed in European countries, in American countries, are in this situation than in the time of Musil. And this is why um, I believe reading this novel, not reading it as a specialist, not reading it as a literary critic, but reading it in a positively naive way by identifying with this protagonist, can be enticing, can be interesting, can be very rewarding for present-day readers.
So read it.
Yeah,
Go on.
myself clear.
Yeah, of course, very much so. Yes, thank you. So read it. We should read it in an existential sense, and try and see parallels between what Ulrich wants to achieve and what we might be able to achieve. So either a goal that is attainable, or I think this is we can draw from the novel, or we just have to get serious that we stay without qualities and
Yeah.
with just possibility.
I mean, there is no solution in the book,
Yeah,
not only because it is a fragment. I mean, Ulrich doesn't find a profession. I mean, he participates in a political action that Musil events was existing in Austria in 1913, etc., etc. He doesn't find this fulfillment, and he doesn't find this fulfillment till the end. We can later on talk about the second part of the novel. So, I mean, the book will not teach a reader who can identify with Ulrich in any way, but maybe that would be my reading recommendation, and that is my way of reading the book. By going with Ulrich through all these situations, these possibilities, by always seeing alternatives, you can see what he's doing. He basically makes thinking his life form. He doesn't become a philosopher, but living in these alternatives uh, becomes a life form. So you can, in a positively naive way, I mean, you can identify with him and can go through these life forms and maybe find a quote unquote solution for your own present day problem by seeing that thinking is not just the specialty of strange people who have chairs for philosophy at universities, but thinking can be a form of existence that does not necessarily require solutions or outcomes. You can just go on thinking. That can become your way of living your existence. I mean, I'm not saying that is the correct reading of The Man Without
yeah,
Qualities, but that is a way in which reading Musil, uh, meaning The Man Without Qualities, is not only enjoyable for present-day readers, but can have an existential function for present-day readers.
yeah,
Besides that, um, compared to James Joyce, for example, and Marcel Proust, who are the two great other authors who are always compared to Musil, um, Musil's prose is witty, is funny, is descriptively dense, but it's easily accessible. Yeah? It's
yeah,
easily accessible in the existing translations. It's easily accessible in German, much more than reading, for example, James Joyce. I mean, I'm a great James Joyce fan, but each time that you turn a page of Ulysses, for example, it is like lead. I mean, it is very heavy. You know that you have been working. That is absolutely not the case with Musil. I mean, for me to warm up a little bit for our conversation today,
yeah,
I said yesterday afternoon, I finished my working day I wanted to read a couple of pages with The Man Without Qualities. And all of a sudden, it had become too late for dinner, and I had read 120 pages. So it's addictive. It is easily accessible, and at the same time, which is almost a paradox, it is highly philosophical intelligent.
yeah. There's lots of philosophy in there for anyone who has read a bit of German idealism, Heidegger, etc. Das Mahn is explicitly mentioned, as you know, towards
Yeah.
the end. And reading it, I mean, if I might be wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, that Musil said that there's two ways of reading this. You have to read it as a whole, but you can also read it in a fragmentary way. So you can always just pick out certain chapters.
Yeah, I mean, there are these philosophical chapters that you can read independently. For example, one of the first chapters about the distinction between the sense of reality and the sense of possibility, which I think is, I don't like to say an eternal chapter, but it certainly has a relevance for present day life. But then there are also these portraits. Yeah? I mean, there is one of the big protagonists of The Man Without Qualities is a mass murderer, Moosbrugger. And there is a portrait of this very strange mass murderer who is so strange because everybody finds him a very nice, a very congenial, a very benign person. And yet he had killed a prostitute in the most awful way, torturing her to death. So you find portraits, you find descriptions of situations. Yes, you can read these books in fragments. I think that is a way that most people read it. In a way, there is no way out of reading it as a fragment because it is a fragment. It is unfinished. But you can also read it, and I actually like to do this as a plot, as a novel, because there is development in the life of this man without qualities. I'm not saying that this is necessarily a solution for readers who are looking for solutions. But while he always has lovers and has certain erotic attractions, and while he is always involved in circles, I mean, the fictional character is a focus of attraction. Everybody wants to be with him because he's intelligent, good-looking, influential, etc., etc. But surprisingly, after about 1,000 pages, he meets his almost forgotten sister Agata. Agata is a very boring marriage, and he finds that Agata is very attractive to talk to. Because in a way, Agata has not had all this education that the man without quality has had, the best education it can possibly think, and is conversant in philosophy, is conversant in mathematics, in science, etc., etc. But she has an intelligence that I would call substantial, an intelligence that is not reflexive. She has also a certain physical attraction that the man without quality notices, and that Agata notices it. So the novel goes towards what is, until the present day, the most prohibited social relationship, towards an incestuous relationship. You know, they play out, could they be like twins? This becomes a motif. But there is also an erotic attraction. And in that sense, one could say that even if Musil had lived another 30 years and would have been in a better financial and existential situation, there was no way to finish this novel because, I mean, an incestuous relationship cannot be the solution of the problem of a man without qualities. Nevertheless, I have to say, as my personal reading, I'm not aware of any tendencies towards incestuous relationship in my own life. And yet, I do think it is a book, if you have time enough, that can be great pleasure in a reading as a novel, yeah, in a reading as a development, what happens. So you can not only read it in fragments. I want to emphasize it is also exciting, interesting in its details, in its development. I'm actually personally, I mean, not that I need to have a preference, but I like the second part, the last 400 pages, if possible, even more than the first 400 pages.
Why is that? If you
Well, because it has a strong attraction. Yeah, I mean, something is happening. At the beginning, the man without qualities takes this year off, and then he moves in Vienna and becomes more and more man without qualities. He has more and more qualities. He has more and more things he can possibly do. He has more offers, but nothing really captures his attention, captures his intellectual and existential investment. And then all of a sudden, um, from the first, and not the first encounter in their life, but this long, not lost sister, but she was not part of his life. And he finds it strange that he wants to meet her again. He wants to see her again. And you see also on her side, she is in this not even unhappy marriage. It's just a boring, normal marriage in the society, Austrian society before 1914. And something is developing there. So you have a different investment as a reader. So I think The Man Without Qualities, that doesn't have this traction of a narrative at the beginning. And this is how most people read it towards the end in a very subtle, complex, and I think beautiful way develops such an attraction. I have to say I'm an old man, so there cannot be any bad suspicions. I'm 78 years old. I do not know in European literature, I go so far, any more erotically attractive female character than Agata. Yeah, this is very surprising. If you read the first couple of hundred pages, you would not emerge such a character to emerge. There are good-looking, powerful, influential women like Diotima, who presides a kind of salon in Vienna,
Yeah.
and who is a portrait of real existing persons in that time in Vienna. Agathe is an eccentric character, uh, but this is my personal reading. I find Agathe in the double sense attractive. Like you say, you imagine an attractive character, but also attractive that you want to continue reading. All of a sudden, you read The Man Without Qualities, you read this long text with a different rhythm. You want to see on the next page, you want to see what will happen.
Perhaps this is a good moment to maybe if you could describe what perhaps awaits people at the course also in terms of seminars and lectures and what you're going to read. And
And we will focus in the course on this is the inevitable way of approaching The Man Without Qualities, because it is such a long and such a complex book. We will mainly focus in the lectures after an introductory lecture in which I will unfold more what I've been doing at the beginning of our conversation, historical context, what are the novels, etc., etc. We will focus on individual chapters. We will want the participants of the course to read 1 or 2 chapters. They are not too long, 20 pages. There will be a weekly reading of plus minus 50 pages. And as I'm seeing, Musil is not technically difficult to read. You can enjoy that, you can read that. And we will then, focusing on such chapters, unfold the possibilities of thinking. You know, to give you an example, I've mentioned this mass murderer, Moosbrugger. Yeah, this is the strange mass murderer because everybody likes him somehow. You're not supposed to like a mass murderer, but all of a sudden you realize how reading this chapter, and Moosbrugger comes back. There's not only one chapter, but how this portrait, in a strange way, engages your thinking, and you begin to think about a crime, about a murderer in a different way. Not that all of a sudden you say, oh, murderers are normally nice people, but your view of the world becomes more complex. And I want to emphasize more complex, not in a way that then you find a solution. No, that's what I mean. It makes thinking, so to speak, an existential form. It is an endless complexity. And you observe how, based on Musil's text, it will entice, it will activate your own thinking. So this is what we want to do with different individual chapters. Not so much helping the participants to understand Musil. That is relatively easy. As I'm saying, it's not difficult to read, and it's normally, once you take the time to read it, it is fun to read. But to emphasize this possibility to get your own thinking as a life form, as an existential form going based on this book. So in this sense, my ideal, my hope would be that participants in this seminar will enjoy the concentration of this absolutely marvelous text, will enjoy the discussions that they have with coaches that will be existing for this seminar, conversations that they can have with me, but ultimately will go out of this course having read one of the great literary texts of the 20th century, and I would say of the last millennium in Western culture, and at the same time having experienced a pleasant change in their own life form, that all of a sudden thinking becomes a habit, and not a habit that leads to goals, but a habit that you actively enjoy your own thinking. That would be the ideal goal, of course, for me. I managed to do that is yet a different question.
I think you will. That's excellent. Because so Walter being the mathematician, we think of mathematics as a precise or the precise science above all, but it turns out it's isn't all that precise. So what I find also fascinating with what you've just been discussing, I forgot exactly which chapter. It's still the first book, maybe 40, where the Geist, spirit, or mind is introduced properly, and I think Kant is mentioned. But it's not about, as you say, trying to find a goal in thinking so much as being able to make finer, better distinctions and being
I
able
mean,
to attracted to them. It's a keine Schwärmerei, no enthusiasm, uh, no romanticization, but
you're perfectly right. I mean, this gives me an opportunity to say a little bit more about Musil's biography. Um, Musil actually was a young intellectual in the Austrian Empire who was interested in the development of philosophy that today we call analytic philosophy, that is very close to mathematics, that plays with very exact distinctions and definitions, that is very close to the tradition of logic. So not philosophy as a high-flying idea, a production of new ideas. I mean, not philosophy in the style of Nietzsche or in the German style of Hegel. So Musil was a philosopher very much on the logical side, uh, on the mathematical side. And this has to do with the historical context in which he was growing up. This was the Vienna intellectuality. I mean, there's a very famous book, Vienna fin de siècle, as a concentration, a great concentration, a great moment, like maybe Paris in the mid-19th century, of Western intellectuality and culture. But at the same time, I feel that while Musil in every sentence is very precise, that while Musil in this chapter 14 that you're mentioning insists biographically on the necessity of precise definitions, in the end, what the man without quality perhaps does not produce as a text is a different intellectual style. It is a free-floating intellectual style. It is an intellectual style that always has to do with the possibilities of seeing alternatives, yeah? Of seeing the other side of it. This is the man, I mean, this is the sense of possibility. I think this is what you take out of the book, although this might not have been really Musil's intention. And this might have been another reason why Musil was endlessly revising this book. This is a reason also biographically why he couldn't finish it, because he wanted to be more precise and to get in these descriptions of characters a complexity. And as you say in English, the word is ambiguous, eine Prägnanz, a concreteness that is unheard of, but always very complex. But at the same time, the way you play with it is that it is an initiation to your own thinking. Yeah. I mean, I said in a conversation with a friend recently, I read this book for the first time in my life, entirely between my high school graduation and my first semester at the university. And when I started reading the book, I had no clue what I would choose at the university and what my imagination of a profession would be. And the book, as I can formulate it today, made me aware that thinking can be a life form. Not thinking in the sense that you constantly read your entire life, The Man Without Qualities, but that thinking in it by itself has an attraction, has a beauty, has a value of entertainment that transcends any individual book or any individual text you can read.
And if we now, just to finish, perhaps jump to the second book, which you've already done, and feel free to go off in any direction, really. There is, towards the end, as you know, more and more mention of ein großes Ereignis, a great event. Ereignis is also philosophically charged, or event is really philosophically important now after Nathorp and Heidegger, who probably took it from Nathorp, the Neo-Kantian, and of course Badiou and others. Um, I mean, obviously, we're not looking for the solution or the it remains a fragment, but d- d- it begins, I think, 34, and großes Ereignis ist im Entstehen. So something seems to be coming. What is it that you think is coming? And maybe you could tie this in also with the parallel
Well, I think there are two levels, and there are two levels. Uh, the one level is the narrative in it by itself. And the narrative, of course, is this Austrian Empire, which when Musil wrote the first chapter, it starts with a description of the weather in Vienna on August 13, very precise description in the Musil style, on August 13, 1913. And it is as if this world was still open. But everybody who read even the first pages, I mean, the book was never published entirely during Musil's, I mean, Musil never published entirely what was the pages he had. I mean, it was always supposed in subsequent deliveries. You would notice that this empire, this world, not only the Austrian world, had just exactly a year to live. This was exactly a year before the beginning of World War I, which was the end of this world. So there is a certain irony for a reader, already a contemporary reader, that they always expect one big event, and the big event, if anything, will be the capitulation in 1918, the dissolution, the end of this empire. But how naive is it that they still hope in this year to produce such an event? So that is one level. But you can, of course, whether this was Musil's intention or not is not even important for a reader. You can again transfer that to our situation. And I sometimes think maybe we are today in a situation that is similar to this Austrian Empire. I mean, similar to the higher middle class of the Austrian Empire, where everybody is doing quite well, but where we feel that in our personal lives, not so much in politics, there is a lack of something happening. We want something to happen. We want something exciting to be in our life. We want projects to have, but we have no projects. And also on this level of the big event that we would so much desire, although we do not know what this big event would probably be. And I'm talking about American intellectuals, I'm talking about intellectuals in the UK, in the EU, etc., etc. I think also in this sense, there is a strange affinity between present-day men and women without qualities and what this novel has to offer. In this sense also, and it was definitely not Musil's intention, we could say that there's an ironic relationship between this ending to which the protagonists always are pointing and which the protagonists desire, and the novel being unfinished. And I'm deliberately not saying a fragment, yeah? We do not know what will happen at the end, and the more that the second part of the novel emphasizes and condenses this desire of something to happen, the less something happens. And from the fragments that we had, from the projects that Musil had for continuing the novel, we can definitely say that even if he had ever finished the novel, which I think was impossible, he didn't have such an ending in mind.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your time, Sepp. And I'd like to invite all of you again to follow the link in the description of this video and take a look at the enrollment page. Studymusil.com is the website, actually put together by a student of mine and a friend of yours, Till Gross, who's read Musil and found that this is a book about me, he thought.
Wrote this website, and I will not go into any specific descriptions, but maybe he is one of those contemporary men without qualities. And in this sense, I was very impressed by how much he liked this novel. But maybe I was a man without qualities, a very young man without qualities, when at age 18, I read this book for the first time. And maybe I finished by saying, the reading that I started yesterday afternoon, and I got lost, I read much more than I had planned, and that I will do along the chapters and along this course, will be the fourth time in my life that I read The Man Without Qualities from the first to the last page. And what I can say retrospectively, and already retrospectively also to yesterday, it was not like reading the same novel. The way it engaged me in my own thinking in different chapters and in different moments of my life was very, very different. And in this sense, I also think that it can speak to many different types of readers. So try it out with the course we are doing or not. But I promise you that you will have a good time reading Musil. And if not, I will invite you for the drink of your favorite drink of your choice.
Perfect. That's a good event. Thank you so much, Sepp, for your time. Thank you everyone for listening, and take a look at the course website. Thank you.